What a way to end the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. For the first time, I'm actually lost for words. A season finale that has not only managed to stick the landing, but gets us excited for what is to come, and gives us a look at the path not taken in the Star Trek universe. Welcome to Trek Central, I'm your host Captain Jack, and today, let's get straight into it for our final review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. This is of course our review of A Quality of Mercy, written by showrunners Henry Alonso Myers and Akiva Goldsman, while being directed by Chris Fisher. Does this deliver us a Star Trek season final worthy of the great status? Honestly, we think so. But let's explore why and what events might mean for the upcoming second season of Strange New Worlds. Now before we warp into this video, if you want to keep up to date on the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media for daily updates on the Star Trek universe. But as always, please let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then of course we want to hear about it. Okay, I'm gonna say the thing, hit it. Now this is a big episode, and has a lot to talk about, but first let me just say I really enjoyed this overall. This is an episode of Strange New Worlds which only Strange New Worlds could actually do. Extremely yesterday's Enterprise of them, but having it be spearheaded by Pike's own decision and him wanting to escape his eventual fate was rather cool. Let's talk a little bit more about the story first off before we dive into some of the more concrete details and such. First off, I think we have a responsibility to say that we essentially called this episode in our article on our website, trekcentral.net, about a week ago. And we did some clues in the teaser trailer of course, but this episode also has some bases in Star Trek comics as well. This article's linked below in the video description and now will be sort of spoiler free as you've seen this episode, so go read it if you want to see if we were right. We were, so go read. Pike looks at a time crystal to see his future, but also what might happen if James T. Kirk never assumes command of the USS Enterprise. The episode basically does the same, but with a different purpose to it, and it's great that these Trek writers are looking back at previous works in Trek and making it work for story and live action entertainment. Now this episode was basically Balance of Terror from the original series, a fantastic episode, which if you haven't watched it, especially after this episode, we highly recommend it. We're taking this beloved classic episode, and yet giving a spin on which works, and is so personal to our characters is not just nostalgic for brilliance, but is excellent in general. We often hear, especially after the Marvel What If series, that this would be a cool premise for a series in Star Trek. This episode is essentially a what if episode. What if Pike remained aboard the Enterprise and didn't have his accident? How would things be so different? And unfortunately in this situation, what happens is a war breaks out between the Federation and the Romulan Star Empire, which does proceed to be fought for decades, with millions, maybe even billions dying at the hands of Romulans and the Federation during the war. The chance of peace between the Federation and the Romulans is also lost along the way, which we see in this episode. This episode not only enhances Balance of Terror, knowing how critical the event was, and how important it was that Kirk be the commander of the Enterprise at the time, but also other stories and events in the Star Trek universe as well. It solidifies how important Spock is and his mission of peace between Vulcans and the Romulans, which we see come to fruition with Navarre in Star Trek Discovery Season 3 and 4. A little nudge that George Kirk, James Kirk's father, and Sam Kirk, was aboard the USS Kelvin. Something which we see at the point of a temple split between the Prime timeline and the Kelvin timeline in the Star Trek 2009 movie. It was rather fascinating how the episode is so similar to Balance of Terror, with a lot of the story beating out this original episode and still happening how it sort of did at the end of the day. Yet the differences occurring between this episode and Balance of Terror are coming about due to the difference of captain in command, i.e. Pike and Kirk. It is very much a what if situation as we just mentioned, with all the elements that need to be the same being the same, and yet having those differences come about because of the different characters in different positions at this time. This very much highlights just how different Captains Kirk and Pike actually are, which is fascinating to watch I must say, and it does make you wonder how different the original series would be if Pike was still the captain and not Captain Kirk. Now don't forget, this was the original premise of the original series, because Pike was originally the first captain, so yeah. Now even having a wedding being officiated by the captain of the ship between Robert Tomlinson and Angela Martin. What is really cool is in this third Tomlinson and Martin couple seen in Star Trek, with Kelvin Tomlinson and Martin dying to Krall in Star Trek Beyond, but showing this change in the timeline between this episode and Balance of Terror by having Angela die instead of Robert. It's a nice touch for those who've watched Balance of Terror all those years ago, or those who might be watching it before or after this episode, because I'm definitely going to be watching it again. I will say one aspect of this episode, of being Balance of Terror, was the use of Enrique Ortiguez. In this episode, she essentially fulfills the role of Styles in Balance of Terror. Styles was very angry towards the Romulans, and had reason for his ancestors dying in the Earth-Romulan War. And we get this great line from Kirk of, "Leave your bigotry in your quarters." Kirk strikes back against this bigotry from Styles. However, Pike just tells Erica to stand down, even raising his voice at her, something which we haven't seen Pike do yet. Now obviously it has been 7 years since we last saw Erica. Things could have happened in those 7 years that made her less her in a sense. Whether this be the loss of Una or any other things, who knows. But I felt it was extremely different from Ortega's, and maybe this was my point at the end of the day, but I didn't particularly gel with it and it didn't stick very well with me. So, we've of course got to talk about the introduction of Captain James T. Kirk of the USS Farragut. Thankfully, we once again predicted this here at Trek Central. The giveaway was via social media and other means, which was super cool. However, does Paul Wesley give off good Captain Kirk vibes? Yeah, he sorta does. Initially, the casting of Paul Wesley as Captain Kirk made some wonder if he was the correct choice. However, it now makes more sense. It's also interesting to theorize that Paramount's hand was kinda tipped when Wesley was spotted filming the second season. Obviously, this surprise has been well kept by the season finale for now, so that's pretty cool. Now, I will say that we're seeing this younger but also future Kirk in this episode. Due to the timeline changes, we're seeing Kirk similar to how he would be in the original series but slightly different. The benefits of time travel. Wesley still keeps some of Kirk's mannerisms and command style, which works really well. Honestly, the scenes with Pike and Kirk also flow nicely in my opinion. It'll take me some time to warm up to him, but I'm liking it. This was heavily a Pike-centric episode, with his personal log at the beginning and the focus on his fate. We really have to give credit to Anson Mount and his portrayal of Captain Pike. The episode was so amazing because of Anson Mount. Seeing his future version of Pike, and yet it being played by Anson so well, was awesome. You could sense his tiredness, you could see it in how he carried himself and how his voice got out. It was very hoarse and very dry. Probably from fighting a war for decades and having to give such orders during that war. I also have to say, having future Pike in the Monster Marine uniform, otherwise known as the Wrath of Khan uniform, but this uniform being updated to show it came straight from Strange New Worlds, was really cool. Many cosplayers are gonna love this. It is recognisable as the Monster Maroon uniform, and yet tells us straight away it came from Strange New Worlds and not the original series, owing to the changes in the timeline, and also just how dirty this uniform looked, giving some insight to the conditions this Pike has been through in his future. This future Pike has seen millions die, and eventually realised that in some aspect, his decisions brought it about, and we still got the Anson Mount Pike we have come to love of sort of bleeding through his performance. And this is not even talking about our main Pike, who honestly did an amazing job still. We not only see how effective he is at the beginning of the episode by meeting someone he feels responsible for dying, a child who would be a cadet who dies on a training cruise, but then throughout this episode we get these amazing bits as well. Seeing the scene of Pike going into sickbay and finding Spock completely injured, losing a leg, brain damage, radiation burns and spinal fractures. The emotion in Pike was heart-wrenching at this moment, and this is all a testament to Anson Mount as the character. We are lucky to have him as our Pike. Jeffrey Hunter was Pike, Bruce Greenwood was Pike, but Anson Mount has solidified himself as my Captain Christopher Pike. And for a character who was introduced almost 60 years ago now, that is amazing. One thing we have to mention is this episode mentions that 2 cadets don't make it, and Pike decides to fix that by making sure none of the cadets or himself are there for the incident. This is emphasised by future Pike, by saying he tries to save both of the cadets and himself. But it seems like Pike's decision in this episode does indeed affect that incident. In the Menagerie, it is said that no cadets die, so with Pike accepting his own fate, it seems like he still changes the future slightly, and makes sure that none of the cadets die or suffer his fate, and yet he still makes sure he himself suffers a fate so someone like Spock doesn't have to in the future. Let's talk about the Romulan Commander. They're a very fascinating character, as all the way back to Balance of Terror, it's sort of a mirror. This commander is wary of war, and doesn't want to go to war, but is fulfilling his duty as a member of the Romulan Star Empire. You know, unfortunately it does seem like in any timeline this Romulan commander is destined to die, perhaps being a fixed event. I mean, he's not even giving a known name actually. I know in some sources he's called Karas, but this is only because it is Sarek reversed, so kind of fun. Also, with the Romulan commander, he mentions the Reman campaign, which presumably was putting down an uprising on Remus, or something like that. This was an amazing little world building nugget to throw into the script, and gives us more Reman mentions, which I love. Remus appeared very little in TOS onwards, due to not being invented until Star Trek Nemesis. But seeing him in Enterprise, and now mentioning him in this episode is really cool, and I really love this little mention for the sake of world building. Now while we're talking about Romulans, we see a Romulan fleet of this era, and honestly it's amazing. They've definitely learned from the mistakes of Star Trek Picard, this being showing a single ship fleet. Whether it be with a Federation fleet in Picard Season 2, but also this new Romulan fleet in Strange New Worlds. We get 3 separate types of Romulan ships in this fleet. The Bird of Prey classic starship, a proto-singular deck Digidex looking ship, and then the flagship which looks really cool and almost Talon-like compared to the more bird-like ships of the rest of the fleet. I love it. Now to counter up a fleet of just automated mining drones, bluffing there the Delta class attack fighters was really cool, and clever with the emphasis on not really knowing what Romulan or Federation ships are like from either other side at this point. Let's talk about the direction of this episode, by Chris Fisher, because this episode was a joy to watch. We get some very interesting directional choices in this episode, with Chris Fisher really solidifying himself as a director. I would love to see more of him in Star Trek overall. There are a lot of very close camera shots in this episode, focusing on characters such as Spock and half his face being shown, while the other part on the screen is the mind meld he is witnessing. This is a fantastic scene where Pike walks into sickbay, and also the camera is on extremely focused and still on Pike, almost like a POV cam in a sense. To him at least. These are more unorthodox styles of visualizing these scenes, whereas gamble, and I think they paid off in enhancing the story they are trying to tell. Like I said, the scene in sickbay focusing on Pike really enhances and puts at the forefront of the emotions that Pike is currently feeling. He doesn't even have to say anything for us to know what he's feeling. That's only because of Anson Mount and his brilliant acting skills, but with the camera work as well, so we've got to commend that. I've got to say, Naomi Melvaz, the composer of the score of the season, has done an amazing job. Throughout the season, not only utilising pre-existing Star Trek music, but coming up with new tracks that truly enhance the episode. She continues to do wondrous work in the episode with the Romulan Balance of Terror theme and other musical cues which remind us of the original series, as well as Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and the similarity yet still the difference. I wasn't too big of a fan of music utilised at the end of the episode with Pike wandering around the bridge looking at his family, but it does work. I think it does actually work. Should have used Rocket Man by Elton John, I'm just saying. I do hope the Season 2 soundtrack is out sometime soon, we'll keep you updated with that when it comes around. And talking about the final part of the episode, there is a lot of good here, a truly fascinating scene which we should talk about. Let's talk about Pike and Kirk first. The scene of Pike and Kirk getting to know each other was amazing, with Pike realising that it's Kirk who should be captain of the Enterprise, specifically for this situation. Kirk is a fantastic captain, even said so by his brother, and yet is a very different captain than actual Pike is. Even saying that the Enterprise would be lucky to have captains like Kirk, obviously playing to what we know will happen in the future. Part of me wonders if this event, with Pike learning about Kirk having not technically met him in the Prime timeline, is what recommends him for captaincy of the Enterprise. In the original series, Kirk says he's only met Pike once, during the handoff of the Enterprise. This episode makes sense that Pike would recommend Kirk for the captaincy and not officially actually meet him. Another character interaction at the end was between Pike and Spock. Spock managed to use logic to figure out it was Pike avoiding his fate, and it was Spock who would suffer by that. This then reflects the original series in amazing ways. Particularly in the Menagerie, Spock commits mutiny for Pike after his incident. After this episode, Spock will see that Pike suffered his fate in place of him, and therefore feel like he owes a debt to Pike, his former captain. So conclusion wise, this was a fantastic episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and just Star Trek as a whole. Doing something only a prequel series can do, and doing it extremely well, enhancing future stories which we love, and bringing new light on things long lost gone. This episode gave us fantastic character performances from Anson Mount, Ethan Peck, and namely Paul Wesley. It gives us a tease of what's to come from Paul Wesley. Like we said with Scotty, and the story of Una, Season 1 has been a really good first season of Star Trek. They're giving us these isolated episodes that still have this thread within them. Oh, like I said, I just mentioned Scotty, but we forgot to mention him earlier. We get Scotty. Well, it's an engineer, but it's highly implied this is Mr. Scott. Unfortunately, we don't actually see him, we just hear him down the bottom of the Jeffries tube. Still kinda cool. You know, the scene would have worked better if it was Scotty in the Jeffries tube and Spock down the bottom shouting up to him. That kind of worked a little bit better than why we couldn't see him. Oh well. Strange New Worlds has had a fantastic first season that's now under its belt, and we're definitely looking forward to what the future has in store for us and the intrepid crew of the Enterprise. We've already got hints of the second season of the show, as well as some exciting new details to break down. Tune into an upcoming video where we discuss everything that we know about Strange New Worlds Season 2. Now I've got to ask, what did you think of the Strange New Worlds season finale? Did it live up to your expectations as a Star Trek season final, or did you expect more? Either way, let us know your thoughts in the comments, because if you're talking about Star Trek, then of course we want to hear about it. Don't forget to keep up to date with the latest Star Trek news, lore and more, then make sure to hit that subscribe button to never miss a video from the team here at Trek Central. You can also follow us on social media or join our community Discord server. But for now, I've been Captain Jack, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time. Live long and prosper my friends, goodbye.